We go. Ray Ives, the pen of an underdog. A lot of stuff happening up to this point, and thank you for joining once again. So right now it's part 5 of the pen of an underdog, and this part is called Career Acceleration, circa 2012 to 2019. A lot of interesting stories here. I'm not going to get bogged down in like all the details of the stories. If you want to take the shortcut, check out the book, The Pen of an Underdog by Ray Ives. It's on Amazon. You will not be disappointed. I firmly believe that. I firmly believe if somebody picked up the book and was like, you know what, this is a piece of junk. Is it written perfectly? Absolutely not. Is the grammar flawless? Is the wordsmithing, a literary piece of art? No. But the stories and the combination and the lead up to the experience of becoming a 30-day author. Becoming a 30-day author was something I'd never imagined. And so when I became a 30-day author, right, writing a 90,000 word plus book in 30 days, 3,000 words per day, I just thought to myself, if this can be done, if I could do this, you can do anything. And I firmly believe that. And the book is, it's a 7-part series. There's a lot in there. So if you want the shortcut, The Pen of an Underdog, it's on Amazon. Check it out. So here we are, part 5. The subchapter is called Canada, right? I wish I could do that with a Canadian accent. Canada. So I was working in the grocery retail space for a food broker representing a ton of manufacturers, everything from pies and cookies and sweet goods, croissants, artisan bread, you name it. I represented it at a very, very high level, like Fortune 26. And in that space and in that department, it's really hard to be, health and wellness, right? And I get it, like that department is indulgent. But if you think about it, there's a lot of ingredients and a lot of the food that's just questionable. Now, there was two companies that I knew of. I'm sure there's a lot in the space, but there was 2. One was called Las Boring Bakery. That was a great company. Really started to spin artisan at a time that a lot of people didn't know what fresh baked artisan bread was. Las Boring Bakery took it next level. It started in Los Angeles on a street called Las Boring and used only real ingredients, no preservatives, no fillers, no artificial enzymes. It was good. It was a good product. Well, that was one company. If I had ever left the food broker, I was like, okay, that's one company. The other one was a company called the OG Mastery. The OG Mastery was a premium dessert company that specialized in European layer cakes, and it originated in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. It was privately owned, and I just remember getting excited about this product because it was 100% whipped cream, Belgium chocolate, the sponge cake, no mixes, no bases. It was all made from scratch, real fruit. And I always thought to myself, if that was a company that had a position open, I would be all for it. I'd be like, okay, great. Like Las Boring Bakery, artisan bread, cool. The OG Mastery, European layer cakes, awesome. Both very entrepreneurial, very, very entrepreneurial. So it was one of those days. It was the summer of 2012, and I was going to lunch with the OG Mastery, and there was 2 people that were going to lunch. It was the vice president of sales, Donald Fullerton, and the vice president of product development, Susan Roscoe. So, and it was interesting. Donald was like an outlier. He was rare in the grocery retail world. Canadian nice, but it was almost like he seemed like Canadian royalty. He had a swagger, right? Designer shoes and nice suits and awesome shirts and even his socks, to the point where his socks matched his shirt. And on top of all that, like, he was cool. He was a great guy. He was smart. He was well liked. And then same thing with Susan. Susan, she was a product genius. Really would get into the nuts and bolts and developing recipes and tweaking things to a point that everything became so unique and so proprietary that it was the greatest competitive advantage. So out to lunch, Susan excuses herself. Oh, excuse me, I have to take a call. She goes out on her BlackBerry, and then I'm sitting with Donald, and Donald was always easy to talk to. He's like, hey, I have to ask you something. Anthony, who's the national account manager, he has to leave the company. He has to leave the company. He can no longer travel for whatever reason, whatever personal reasons. And Donald was like, hey, do you know anyone that would be interested in the national account manager's role? And I was like, wow, that's a good question. My boss, Denzel, and remember, Denzel was my mentor. Denzel was my mentor. He was a smart guy. He was in the industry for a very, very long time. And he was having a tough time dealing with Martha. And I was like, okay, here's a great guy. Get him out of the poison, get him out of the venom of corporate schizophrenia, and get him working for a great company. And so Donald's like, okay, yeah, that's great. Anyone else? Do you know of anyone else? Honestly, I'm like, I started going through my Rolodex and, thinking through all my contacts. And I was like, Donald, let me think about it. I'm sure there's somebody at the corporate office or somebody that I'm playing racquetball with or basketball with that'd be interested. And so he kind of shrugged it off and he was smiling. He gave this smirk and he's like, do you know anyone that would be interested in the position? You. And he said it just like that. He was directly saying, without saying, hey, you should interview for this job. It'd be great to have you for our company. You do good work for us now. Why don't you come over on the manufacturing side? It was that unspoken courtesy within the industry. You couldn't really go and poach you couldn't ask directly. It's just this thing where you can't go up to somebody and be like, hey, you know what? You work for this company. Forget that company. Come work for us. Nobody really did that. And it's a delicate situation where manufacturers work for brokers, brokers represented manufacturers, manufacturers supplied to the retailers, wholesalers. There was a lot of pieces involved in the supply chain. And out of respect, nobody really crossed those lines. I was so happy and grateful to be recognized for somebody just to come up to me at the time and say, hey, we'd like you to be a national account manager, right? And I put this all in perspective, the then and now. And at that time, the then and now, I started thinking about my small victories. And my point of reference was always when I was bartending and I didn't have my college degree. I wasn't educated at the time. And memories, right? Memories just started coming into my head. I remember failing economics class, taking a long time to get my 2-year degree, street fights, but I'm a winner. I could be a winner. I have some street fights, security guard overnight, which is something I had to do to survive, basically finish school, make money, pay rent. And the nights that I was flying back and forth, or the weekends I was flying back and forth from Minneapolis to Chicago bartending, it was like all these memories were just shooting down, and I was grateful. I stood here with a company that I respected offered me a national account manager's role. And a national account manager's role was one of those roles, if I was looking at resumes, it was something unattainable for me. But here I was, I'm going to go and do the best job possible. I am going to try my hardest to get that. And I just remember everything was lined up. The first interview with HR, I remember having everything printed out. I found 20 behavioral questions, functional questions, all the top interview questions, found them, wrote out my answers, printed those or had my notes, and I was ready to go. I rehearsed. And I remember picking the perfect spot. It was in Mount Adams, if anyone's familiar with Cincinnati, Ohio. So it was Mount Adams. Mount Adams overlooks the skyline of Cincinnati, and it's got a bunch of row houses. It's a really cool place. So I remember being down the street from the Cincinnati Playhouse, and I was at the end of the block. Trees are covered, overlooking the Ohio River into Covington, Kentucky, and taking the interview. I just knew that the interview went well. And I knew there was going to be a second interview, and there was a second interview. The second interview was then with Donald. I met him at the Hilton in Cincinnati, which everybody was at. Most of the people traveling into town, business travelers, stayed there. And so I was familiar with the hotel, had the interview there, and that was really just conversational. Donald's like, look, I hand-selected you. I want you in this role. You're going to move forward, not going to go to Canada. You're going to go to Toronto or outside of Toronto in London, Ontario, and take an interview with the president and the vice president of employee experience. Employee experience was their HR department. I was like, okay, great. streamlined, expedited the passport, got the passport. And I remember flying into Canada and getting to the facility and just seeing and smelling a European cake facility. And it was firing on all cylinders. People were happy. They were working. There was music playing. You walked into the lobby. You were greeted. People smiled. This is the company. This is the kind of company that everybody should strive to work for. And if you own a company, it was the company that set an example every entrepreneur, business owner, CEO should set up a company like the experience I had when I was walking in. Nothing I've ever experienced. It was like euphoric. So had the interview there in Canada and did really well. And here I was, offered a position as a national account manager. And I was like, wow, this is really going to accelerate everything I've been through up to this point. Bartending in Chicago, but living in Minneapolis, that commute, or being in Cincinnati in this big corporate office and having Martha Massasoit, just the devil wears coach, right? That person, that boss, that influencer that was just toxic, right? And I thought to myself, like, I put my time in. Time has been invested into my career. I learned, I excelled, and I didn't stop. And I sacrificed a lot. My hometown, Chicago, loved it. Always wanted a job in Chicago. I couldn't get that job in Chicago. And I just knew that this path was going to take me somewhere. A leap of faith, finishing college late, moving from Chicago to Minneapolis, getting a role as a category analyst, going to Cincinnati, getting a role as a corporate sales manager on a huge account. Those defining moments led to this. And all I could say is, you know what? I was enthusiastic, I was happy, and I was grateful. So check out the book, The Pen of an Underdog by Ray Ives. I don't want to get bogged down by the details, but use this as a learning, as a catalyst to figure out, on a path, you're going through something, okay? Stick it out. Stick it out to the end until you attain your goal. And when it's time to move on and move further ahead and expedite your growth, your progress, your continuous improvement plan, do it. Be ready for it. Ray Ives, The Pen of an Underdog. Thanks for joining. Let's stay connected. More to follow.